Hi, good morning, and welcome to Secure the Village, our Cybersecurity Threat Landscape 2019. That's our webinar for the month of February. And this webinar is brought to you by my company, Citadel. Kroll, or one of our guests is with Kroll, Jonathan Fairtlough. We'll meet him in a moment. And the County of Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, again, one of our other guests is John Weller of the DA's office. So let's get started. And Jonathan, you want to introduce yourself?
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jonathan Fairtlough. I am a managing director with Kroll Cyber Risk. We're a investigations and incident response firm that responds to about 1,000 data breaches a year globally. So my primary role at Kroll is I'm the person you call when all the bad things that we're about to walk you through have happened, and you need to figure out how bad is it, what's happened, where this is going to, and what you need to do with the next steps. I'm a former LA County DA. My particular background, I've been managing and working in this space almost as long as Stan, but not quite, I'm coming into my 20th year in cyber.
Very good. We're so happy to have you with us, Jonathan. And John Weller from the DA's office as well. Introduce yourself, John, please.
Sure. Good morning. My name is John Weller. I'm a deputy district attorney with the Los Angeles County DA's office. I'm a part of the cybercrime division. This is a specialized unit. We're dedicated to investigating and prosecuting crimes that has a computer or a cyber nexus. We cover crimes such as data breaches, embezzlement, identity theft, child exploitation. In particular, recently I've been dealing with cases personally regarding criminal activity connected to the dark web, as well as crimes connected to cryptocurrency.
So great, as you can tell, the audience is listening to the expertise of both Jonathan and John. Really a great webinar today. We're going to go over current and emerging cyber risks, who the threat actors are, looking at the anatomy of an attack. Where are those weaknesses? We're going to take a deep look at a couple of the weaknesses that are here. Defensive strategies, of course, you'd like to not get hit as most effectively as you can. And then the advanced planning that is so vital to being able to successfully counter a cyber attack. So with that, Jonathan, why don't you take us through what you're seeing out there in the world? You deal with, as you said, some 7 zillion cyber crimes a year at Kroll. What are you seeing? What's it look like from your side?
Thanks, Stan. Now, I think part of the problem is that when you're dealing with cyber crimes, there's so many possible outcomes. I think if you look at the Common Vulnerability Index, there's close to 100,000 entries. But the reality is that right now, the 3 biggest things we are consistently seeing is ransomware attacks and business email compromises, coupled with people stealing data inside your company. Now, ransomware it was really the big crime of 2017, dropped off a bit in 2018 when business email compromise picked up, but it's come back with a vengeance in the early part of 2019. And there's a big difference now. This time the attackers aren't doing what we call a spray and pray attack, where they're launching multiple different potential emails out and seeing who bites. They're targeting companies. They are identifying things about them on the web, mapping out the way in which these companies do business, entering into their systems early, and while in the systems, taking steps to zero out backups so that people think they have a backup, but in fact, all the data is in fact non-negligible zeros and ones, mapping the key systems that the company depends on, and keeping the encryption very focused to that. We're also seeing much larger ransoms being asked for.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. How does that compare, John, with what you're seeing on the prosecution side, the government side, if you will, law enforcement?
We are seeing and receiving calls about incidences of ransomware as well as business email compromises, Jonathan described. Recently, we've been receiving a rash of, and we talked about it briefly, insider threats. Unfortunately, we're seeing an increase of instances where it's a former employee, and on his or her way out, a couple of things may happen. They may destroy some data connected to that former employer. They may, since they have a relationship or had a relationship with their employer, they know personal information. And so they can skip that step of social engineering and gain access still to email and other forms of data and send out confidential or compromising information to competitors or to clients at the disservice of that company.
Yeah, well, so, and when we look at insider threat, I'm looking at it, if you will, from two different perspectives. I know, as we've talked, so do you. There's the insider who decides to do something bad. He's going out the door or whatever, and is angry or disgruntled or just wants to take the company's intellectual property to his next job. Then there's the cyber criminal who gets inside and gets the user's credentials, the insider's credentials, and now he's acting or she's acting as if they're that insider. What's that distinction that you're seeing there?
Exactly, and that kind of leads to a better point. Sometimes you may see it's not as clear cut. It may be a combination, and so we briefly talked about ransomware. Well, who would know better some of the weaknesses of a particular company, but someone who's in the inside? And so once they've gained information, they may be working in cooperation with a group or other people, which can then send out ransomware, and they would know the weaknesses of a company. I talked briefly about altering data. Sometimes, Stan, it's as simple as sometimes these inside actors or threats, they'll literally just destroy information. I had a case where a disgruntled employee on her way out literally deleted thousands of gigabytes of information. And when this company was trying to find some of this data, they were at a disadvantage. They lost tens of thousands of dollars, and that was just in the loss of business. It cost them even more because they had to go to a consultant to try to obtain help to recover that lost data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jonathan, the whole subject of the threat actor here, the insider, the outsider acting as the insider and all. Say a little bit more about what you're seeing in the investigations that your firm does.
Certainly. Two critical factors here. When most people detect a breach, what they're really seeing is a symptom, not the actual breach itself. The target of a good threat actor is to be able to impersonate and enter in through the front door. So they are constantly looking to escalate credentials. So part of what we're seeing now is a new class of malware coming out that's called, in a very bad name, polymorphic malware. Basically, what it means is that in addition to being a virus, the traditional one that you've seen affecting your system, it's also bringing with it a particular series of tools that are designed to escalate and steal credentials. One of the more famous tools out there is one called Mimikatz. The concept behind it is very simple. You might be a relatively low-level user, someone who doesn't have administrative privileges, but your system is locked down. So what the attacker does is they place a virus into your system and install a tool like Mimikatz. It sits and waits because it knows that because you don't have administrative privileges, you're going to need to be helped or maintained by someone who does. So the virus will cause an issue. The virus will attract the attention of a IT administrator who will come in and help fix the issue. Meanwhile, Mimikatz scrapes their username and their credentials from the system, relays it back to the attacker, and the attacker now has the credentials of an individual who can operate the entire system. And so while you're going to clean up what you think is a malware infection, in fact, you've fallen victim to a targeted credential theft that allows the attacker to then log in as that user. And part of what we're really seeing is this is not something that's easy to detect in terms of using a tool set. This is very much a governance issue. This is how does your IT department respond to threats? What do they look at with it? The attackers are very aware of the tools and can often make use of that response to collect what they need.
Yeah, yeah. It's not it's not the way it was back when we started in this industry, Jonathan. 20 years ago, 40 years ago. Yeah.
It changes every day.
It has changed absolutely every day. On the slide, it's longer term. We've got IoT attacks, certainly. I think when we do the 2020 version of this or the 2021, we're going to see more and more of the IoT attacks, cyber fraud, DDoS. Let's spend a moment or two talking about these. And then I want to talk about if you know the Sherlock Holmes story, the dog that doesn't bark, what's not on this slide, if you will. So let's spend a couple minutes just on the longer term and the general things. John, do you want to kick this off? Looking at, I guess, cyber fraud is something you guys deal in quite a bit. I know you and your colleagues, we regularly talk about this.
True. Some of the things that we're seeing now, as time progresses, and like you said, things are changing every day. There is going to be a time where you can't just pigeonhole and say it's cybercrime, because most crimes most likely are going to have some type of cyber or computer nexus to it, some type of technology nexus to it. One of the things that I've seen recently, and we didn't touch on it too much, even in connection with real estate, where we're seeing people create false identities or assume the identity of a property owner, whether it's a personal property, residential, or commercial property, and while the true owner doesn't know this, ends up either borrowing or securing a loan on that property or assuming control of that property. Well, where does this cyber connection come in? Well, once they secure that particular loan, what are they doing with that money? Well, they're finding new ways to clean it. They may do a wire transfer and end up turning it into gold, as I heard an investigation about that. Or one of the things I know we've all heard about it, as far as once they have that cash, they convert it to Bitcoin, because they feel as if it would be harder to trace, or some other type of cryptocurrency such as Monero or Dash or something like that. And so we're seeing a rise where criminals are recognizing you're not dealing where law enforcement is going to a lot of homes and seeing stacks of cash underneath a mattress. The criminals are getting smarter, and they're using other forms to hide and or launder that money. We're seeing that on the rise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had a colleague who was the victim of a $700,000 cyber fraud in the purchase of a home. Fortunately, we were able to call the FBI in a fast enough way that they were able to get that money returned before it had gotten into bank accounts from which it would not have been returnable. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on kind of these other longer terms and general situations?
Well, I really agree with John. There really isn't such a thing as cyber fraud anyhow. Fraud is just done via cyber. The amount of times I'm seeing a washed check, it's so old school. But what I really want to focus on for folks, particularly those who are investing in property, maintaining companies or systems, is you have a lot of things that for years were never connected to the internet. Your elevator system, your fire suppression system, heating, cooling, things that are mundane, routine, that you think of as equipment. They are being upgraded, and they are being added with internet connectivity, usually for the purpose of enabling repair. The problem is that most people have done no design work around how to create a secure network involving SCADA and IoT systems. They don't realize what they have, and they don't consider these things as part of their network. Because one of the primary ways to make money in cybercrime is through extortion. If you've got a building, I can shut all of your elevators off on the 14th floor with people inside of them. I can create a strong incentive for you to make a payment in order to get your systems back. If I can lock your heating systems on, your cooling systems off, then I can have a disruptive effect for your tenants, or a disruptive effect for your business for the capability to produce. So people need to be aware that their network of responsibility has expanded dramatically, and they need to understand what they have that is available to connect out to the internet. And that's a little bit of counting, a lot of organized, structured note-taking and tracking of what you have. There's a lot of grunt work now in being cyber secure. And one of the biggest things I want people to consider is that what you need to cover has expanded dramatically. It's not
Yeah.
just the PCs sitting on people's desks.
I think that's such an important point for everybody listening to us, that the space has dramatically increased this way. And what you say is, I fear the implications of this as these things roll out and we begin to see more and more of these kinds of attacks, particularly here in the U.S. Other countries have seen them. I think particularly of Ukraine and Latvia under attack from the Russians over the years. And it's only a matter of time until, what is it, downtown Century City, wherever, and a building gets hit that way. I mentioned the Sherlock Holmes, the dog that doesn't bark. What's not here? We had a brief discussion of crypto mining and hacking, and coincidentally, I was talking to an IT vendor who was all about, oh, I just went to this company's event, and they were all talking about crypto mining and how dangerous it is. Well, Jonathan, you were very eloquent the other day why that's not on this list. So you want to?
Certainly. The problem with having someone crypto mine your systems is really focusing on the fact that someone's gotten into them. But the crypto mining itself doesn't exfiltrate data. It doesn't damage or affect the system. It makes use of them. The problem is, well, it's basically like finding someone in your house. What else have they done? What else have they taken? That's the cost with it. But I rarely see crypto mining software itself causing network issues, exfiltrating data, or stealing info. The fact that it's there is a greater problem.
Yeah, it's more the traditional issue of your electricity bill is going to increase, and the fact you need to watch that those employees, in particular as far as Bitcoin, I mean, it would have to just take so much power for that particular cryptocurrency for them to mine it, at least here. I see smaller numbers, but some incidences of crypto mining of other type of currencies. But I agree with Jonathan. Normally, it's not to the point of compromising the data that you own. It's more to the fact of they're draining your resources. And when I mean resources, literally draining your power, your electricity, your computer strength.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Exactly. Okay. Well, hey, let's move on to the next slide. That being taking a look at what we've labeled as the 5 most dangerous vulnerabilities. People, process, technology, third parties, and then the whole governance leadership system, if you will. So, Jonathan, you want to kick this slide off?
Sure. What I think people really need to wrap their heads around is that cyber risk has nothing to do with technology. It has everything to do with the processes by which you handle data. Consider the data of your business like the money of your business. So if you're running a good business, you know who has access to the money. You very quickly lose your money. You need to track who can spend, who can get access to, draw on. You have multiple controls around who can spend. You get a regular audit. You keep a ledger of where your money is and what you're doing with it. It's the same concept with the data that you're holding and the responsibilities you have with it. But the first weakness, which is people, is we consider technology as a tool, not as a major portion of our actual day-to-day life or business responsibility. And we want it to be very convenient, but we also don't want to be inconvenienced by security. And the hard truth is that if you want to be secure and maintain appropriate controls, you're going to be, number one, tracking what people do, holding them accountable, providing clear guidelines to what they can or can't do with things, and creating processes by which they have to show who they are before they gain access. That being said, if you have a well-trained staff, if they understand what the risks to your business are by their failing to follow the structured rules around handling data, they can actually be the best early warning system you have. But unfortunately, we don't train people the right way. We give them a very basic list of what they can't do, and then we commingle. Yeah. Biggest thing for us is work and personal need to be handled separately. Yet, because of, and everyone does this, and it's completely appropriate, we need to stay in touch. We need to know when our daughter's dance recital is, what needs to be picked up for dinner. We want to stay in connection with colleagues and friends who can maybe help bring us business or help add to our overall work environment. So we use the same network as we use for transmitting sensitive data, our work network. Shifting things away from that, providing Wi-Fi, for example, and allowing people to go through Wi-Fi, but stopping personal use of business systems dramatically lowers down risks. And this is where we come back to processes. Our processes are built to make access to data easy. They're not being built to ensure that that data is properly secured. We're not thinking about data as money and as something that we can be held incredibly liable for not handling properly. So the processes are built in the 90s and are about having systems operate fast and easily, not securely. Finally, we come down to the technology piece. The reality is that certain techniques that we've used for years, such as antivirus, are simply no longer up to the job that they used to be. The average antivirus system detects about 30% of the potential threats that are out there. We need to be going towards more structured types of defenses, such as monitoring, endpoint threat detection. But all of these tools have to feed data back to people capable of looking at it, analyzing, and making risk-based decisions. Unfortunately, there is simply no magic bullet out there, no program you can buy and run that is going to make you secure. There are lots of things you can add that will give you insight into your networks and give someone who's trained a good capability to respond, but you need to be thinking about that. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to go out and hire 20 people and build a massive security team. What it does mean, though, is that you need to be putting in place the connections and the contacts to be able to do this. There are many virtual ways to have this done. There are collaborative methods that you can get a lot of information. There are world-class information resources that are absolutely free, particularly here in LA County. But you have to assume responsibility as a business owner and as a data owner to ensure that your people are trained, that your processes look and use data appropriately and securely, and that you're using the right technology. And that's where the third-party piece comes in.
And what Jonathan is speaking to really is you can't let your company grow complacent. And sometimes that's what happens. It's been successful in the past, we've been secure in the past, and that's enough. And it truly isn't. You have to personally and as a business be willing to always adapt and learn and be prepared with these upcoming threats. And Jonathan spoke to it as well. It's hard at times to keep it separate, but you need to keep those personal and those professional platforms separate. It's just cleaner and it avoids a lot less pitfalls if you do that. You feel as if it's connected to complacency that, checking, making sure, did my supervisor actually send this? Well, oh, that'll take too much time. Well, no, that'll save you a lot of trouble if you are possibly sending this personal data to this actor, to this bad actor. No, it's just a phone call or text, your own internal way within the company to authenticate and make sure that that particular timekeeper or that CEO or your supervisor truly wanted that information. And if you think about it, it's less than a minute. It's just a phone call. Well, hey, in this hypothetical, Stan, did you really send that? Jonathan, did you truly want this report? And just kind of thinking it through, why would he want, these W-2s at this particular time? Why would he want the personal identifying information at this time? And so it's a struggle. I realize that, but the big key thing through all of this is the root of it is complacency. At times we get a little too comfortable. I'm not saying get paranoid, but we get a little too comfortable.
And
go ahead, Jonathan. Yeah.
And I think John hit on a really critical point here. You can build a process that says these 5 types of data don't send via email without the approval of your senior manager. You can create a process to reinforce the rule, test on it, and then when people fail, retrain, and if they do well, praise. But most companies don't have anything in their performance review that talks about how secure you keep data, because it doesn't seem to be a risk now. But if you're dealing with data from the European Union right now, and within a year, if you are taking data of California citizens, monetizing that in any meaningful way, then you're going to have to follow a series of rules about that data, be able to track who looked at it, touched it, dealt with it, take it off a network if it shouldn't be there. Well, here's the problem. If you don't know where it is, if it's scattered everywhere, if everyone has access to it and you have no control over it, the cleanup cost is immense. So it's about good hygiene, putting in place processes that protect you,
Right.
getting help, and making sure that you've connected. For example, the DA's office is a proud member of several task forces where you can regularly connect up and meet with local law enforcement, local prosecutors who can talk to you about trends, so that if you have an issue, you know who to call. Firms like Kroll, SecureTheVillage routinely connect up and work with these. It's about having that connection to be able to get input, to get help. It also means, because the other part of this, well, why don't I just give this to somebody else? Why don't I make this someone else's problem? I'm going to outsource this. I'm going to give it to a third party. It'll be their responsibility. That can be a very good solution, but you still have to do your due diligence. Are they secure? How do you check that that's happening, that they're keeping up the security that they promised you or showed you when they started? How can you get your data back if you have a dispute? Where's your data being held? Because the unfortunate thing is, even if you give it to a third party, no matter how big or shiny their name is, it's you who will be held accountable by a customer or by a regulator if that data is lost or mismanaged. A third party can be a great solution. It can help you manage the technology side of the risk, but it doesn't get around your responsibility to know who has it, why they have it, where it is, how it's being secured, who, what, where, when, and why. That's what you want to be able to answer about the things you collect and keep at all times. And that's that last piece, governance.
Exactly. That I was going to say that leads right to that last piece. And governance and leadership, the two sides of that same coin. And the first webinar we did on this whole series had to do with leadership, because ultimately it starts to give an example, listening to this whole discussion around the people and process and John W-2s and so on. We got called into a situation, probably 6-9 months ago, when HR person in a company got an email, looked like it came from the president. It said, send me the W-2 files. Leadership in that particular company was, when the president said jump, you asked how high. The W-2 file was sent. Clearly fraudulent email request. Now it was outside the company. My partner Kimberly had to meet with this HR person, and the woman was in tears. How did I do such a thing? I feel terrible. Really, immense. But to her defense, there were no processes in place. There was no leadership in place. In fact, the leadership was counter what should have been there, to pick up the phone. Hey, boss, did you really ask me to send this W-2 file? That's all it would have taken, the 5 minutes, the 30 seconds to verify it. John, you want to say something?
Sorry, Go ahead, John.
And I've seen, like I said, I've seen it with businesses, and just one additional thing, I'm even seeing it with community service organizations, fraternal organizations, because what's the common thread? If you're on the outside looking in, these perpetrators know that most of these organizations have some form or type of a bank account. So another example I had a friend of mine, he's part of a fraternal organization. He gave me a call. Why? Because he had received a text. And in that text, they said that the head of this organization, well, the person posing as the head of the organization, wanted him to transfer money and provided the account number as well as the proper wiring and routing information. So fortunately for him, he did not take that text at face value. He called the president or head of that organization and said, asked to confirm. And of course, he said, well, no, I did not want that money transferred. But it goes to show you, I mean, these suspects, it only takes a little bit of work. And so they're fishing everywhere. They're fishing at companies looking at it, community service organizations, anywhere where they believe that particular organization or person has some type of money, they're going to try.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, in the interest of time, let's move on to the next slide, where we're going to begin a little deep dive into kind of what's going on here. How's all this stuff happen? So, Jonathan, you want to do this one?
Yep. So the first thing that you have to realize is that the people who are doing this are skilled fraud and theft focused individuals. They are very aware of how you use technology, and they're very aware of the fact that we become complacent and a little bit lazy. So you're going to use your work email address on places that have nothing to do with work. You're going to sign up and you're going to use a username and password. Since most of us have trouble remembering more than 8 random characters, we tend to make and reuse the same passwords with small modifications to get past our initial password filter, but modifications that are extremely well known. So this is a public site. So the first thing a good attacker does is they do recon. They find out about the company, and they're going to look for the email accounts for that company that are publicly accessible where a username and password has been compromised. So a lot of these sites are in the dark web. Some are publicly available. It is not difficult to find these. You can get a YouTube video that will teach you how to access and run these sites. It requires no technical knowledge, no specialized data sources. For this small indication for our own company, 521 email addresses referenced with this. Now, we take very definitive steps in order to protect and to block the misuse of this type of information, but the fact that it is there, this exists on every company, every entity, every group. So step 1, recon or footprinting. Find out about your business, communicate with your business, talk to your marketing people, understand what the business sells, and understand what type of data might be out there. Then, matching this sort of data up with LinkedIn and Facebook, I can identify people I want to target. So if we can go to the next slide, the target method is by making sure that I can get someone at the company to give me access. So after I've done my research, I'm finding the person who I think is going to be vulnerable to a pitch. And the people I want are 2 types. The people I will look at are all types. The 2 people I really want to get access to are people who have administrative level credentials and people who have access to the bank accounts. So I'm targeting everybody in accounts payable, accounts receivable, and finance. And because most companies give administrative level privileges to senior executives, mistakenly equating responsibility over the business with responsibility over the network, those are folks who can get me the biggest return. They are also the easiest to trick and the least tech savvy. So once I've identified my target, my goal then is to send them a communication, get them to bring something across their protections, their firewall, their external wall of protection onto their network that can then allow me as the attacker a way to communicate in. And this is where we see many different forms of what I call a weaponized attack, but I'm going to show you 2 here. The first method is to scare you. So this is where you get, I've identified that you're using G Suite or Gmail. So you get this email. Someone has your password. I give you specific details. It looks like it's being accessed from the Ukraine, and I give you a button to change your password. You see this?
Mm-hmm.
What do? You click on the button. This email did not come from Google. This email came from the attacker in the Ukraine. And by the way, this slide, this is what you are seeing as to how a senior Democratic member of the leadership had his email account compromised.
Mm-hmm.
This
I
email,
just
go ahead.
Weaponization so beautiful because it's because of what it is historically. This is a legitimate a legitimate, illegitimate email, shall we say, that way. And it brought down the Democratic National Committee.
So right here, the goal is very simple. When you get this email, you don't click changed password. You pick up the phone and you call your IT security to validate it. This is where the training, this is where the process comes into play. I can't stop this through any technical means. There is no magic button to prevent this email from coming in, but I can train people on how to respond to it. But you know what? That's something you can probably train to. Let's go to the softer problem, which is weaponized method number 2. You work in human resources. Your job is to routinely, and you are absolutely looking for candidates. You're looking for people who are coming in with a certain skill set. It's a tight job market. You're trying to recruit and keep a good pipeline going. And in comes an email from a young man that seems to fit all the things you're looking for. And there's a resume attached. So you open up the resume. Inside the resume, the moment you run this, here's what actually happens. A script runs that causes your computer to contact out and download software from me, the attacker. That software, known as a dropper, goes past the actual system because you yourself have brought it across. You've given it permission. And once it's on the system, what it then does is unpacks itself and looks for a connection out. And this is the thing that we see commonly. People have very good external defenses there. They've got a good firewall. They're filtering that, but they're not monitoring what's going on inside. It's like having a wall and no cameras. And so when I'm inside as the attacker, I hunt around. I look at your system. I look at what might be there. I look for tools that I might be able to use myself. Are you using Microsoft Office? Is PowerShell available to this user on the C prompt command? If so, I'm in. I can send scripts directly across, type them while connected to your machine, turn off your antivirus, wipe your backup, and open up a door for myself. You've got a good system. This system is a limited user. I drop Mimikatz and wait for, cause a little problem and wait for the admin to come by and fix it, capture the credentials, and come back in. Again, both of these methods have been targeted to fit human nature's response to crisis or need. Classic example, turnover in a position. You get a new finance director, they need to be trained to be very leery of any claim of an unpaid bill or a need for immediate payment that they need to look at an invoice on. Because again, they're trying to do a good job, trying to learn the new business. That invoice can be weaponized just like this. And what it really means here, and you're going to hear me talk about this again, the golden days of email are over. Email is a risk to you, okay? It shouldn't be used to send a resume. Have a site that people can drop it to. Use a service that'll clean up that resume. When someone sends you one with an attachment, respond back very nicely and direct them to your LinkedIn page, direct them to your methodology for updating that info. If you don't have that, if you're still using old school, time to think about an upgrade. Don't use email as a file cabinet. Email is a postcard sent across the internet that anything can be attached to. It is the least secure method of communication in current cyber world.
Very, very, very fascinating. John, just before we go to the next slide, do you want to add anything to this slide and what we're seeing, what you're seeing specifically when you're looking at breaches?
When I look at breaches, what Jonathan was talking about, just the need to be careful and not to grow. Once again, we keep using this term because it's true. You can't grow complacent. And so you need procedures in place to prevent this. We talked about it 2 slides ago as far as making sure that the proper person is sending that email. But now this goes to the next step of necessarily what you're receiving via email, being careful as far as this. And I like that term, your email is no longer your filing cabinet. It's true. You can't use it as that old beacons box anymore of information. It's time to adapt. I would definitely agree.
Yep, very, very true. So let's go on to the next slide. The process of an email attack. again, and Jonathan, thank you for this slide as well. Talk a bit about the kill chain.
So here's what an attacker is trying to do, and here's why email is the method in. First, I can use it for reconnaissance. A nice polite email to someone in your marketing department will get me lots of information about what your company does. A query about the types of security you have. Like I can literally send you an email saying, I'm concerned about your security. How secure are you? What tools and processes do you use? And you know what? A lot of companies will send me back an outline of what they use, what their protections are, what their physical security methods are. Great as an attacker, you've now told me what I need to watch out for and what might be able to catch me. Email becomes an incredible way to do some recon.
Yep.
Also then is the number one vector for getting in, for weaponizing an attack. And the way in which I weaponize it is by attaching something to the email, by creating a payload. That's why we use the phrase weaponization, because of what gets attached to it. Think of it like a missile, right? If the missile just connects in, doesn't have an explosive, doesn't do much damage. It's what can be attached to an email that's critical. And there's many different ways I can attach things. I can use a physical attachment. I can embed a link. I can also redirect you via email. But what people also don't consider as a weaponized issue is the reply all feature. If I really want to get into your system and I want to make sure that I'm controlling a communication, particularly one about money, I'm going to see who's on the communication. I am then going to set up very similar sounding domains, and I'm going to route traffic through them. So when you send me an email as the attacker, I will take that email, change it so that it's going through a domain similar sounding but one I control, and I'll monitor all aspects of the communications back and forth. We use reply all without reading who we're replying all to. And this enables us to keep a long chain of communication. But if I can drop myself in the center of that, I will control that communication. And then when the seller updates the wiring instruction information, I take that email, I modify it, and I send it right on. So an email from the seller as part of the chain, as part of the group, contains absolutely inaccurate wire info. Yeah. And that's where the exploit factor comes in. My goal is to get onto that network, to either control that email account in the event of trying to control a communication for fraud, or to use that email account as an entry to a system. And once I am on that system, that's when I try and exploit my access. And again, this is why the newer tools out there, I'm sure folks have heard of Imhotep. I'm sure they have heard of some of the new types of malware that is out there. What these do is they don't just break in, they bring along something that steals credentials. Why? Because people have started to lower credential use. They've stopped making everyone an admin. So now I've got to capture that info. Once I get there and gain control of that account and gain privileges, then I can execute my scheme. And I can take my time about it. So I use this to get in. I take all of your backups and I convert them into zeros. So you look up and you've got 4 months worth of backups and the data matches. The data in it is gobbledygook. Won't restart or rebuild a thing. I can turn off your antivirus. I can erase your logs. I can remove the alert to critical people. Then when I execute my payload, be it a ransomware attack, be it a theft of data, be it an alteration of data, I leave you limited in your ability to respond. And if I'm really doing this right, I'll leave for myself several backdoors so I can maintain connection. I'll let you come in and fix everything, get comfortable again, and come right back in. This is the constant growth. So within that control through maintain structure, one, I want to be persistent. I'm not relying on an internet connection. I want to be able to directly connect myself through your network. Number two, I want to have the highest level of privilege I can possibly get. Number three, I want to turn off or evade any defenses you have by gaining credential access, understanding what you're doing, and being able to move out of that first person I breached, which is the phrase lateral movement, into people who have better structure. IT administrators or improperly highly credentialed senior staff. And then I run my scheme.
Yep. Yeah.
And the thing to keep in mind, and Jonathan spoke to it, is the fact that if you look at this entire chart, what it shows is just these are calculated attacks. These aren't random. They have a premeditated plan. And so that's part one. And then part two is they are casting wide nets. And you should never feel as if you're alone. They're attacking your company. They're attacking several numerous companies, and they're waiting for that one breach, that one opening that they can get, and then this will continue. So it's very important to be careful. Like I said, not paranoid, but careful, using particular steps and making sure. One example I give, as far as in my line of work, when I'm discussing a pending case and someone may call and want particular information, there's some information that, of course, is open to the public, but some things I can't necessarily say over the phone, or I need to check and make sure that that person is who they say that they are. Well, how do I do that? I may have them call back. I may call them. I may need to check. I'm saying all that to say it's analogous to email. You would do the same thing. It's in a nice, respectful, and professional manner, but it's important to check and to make sure. Look at the body of that email. Look at the syntax. Look at the grammar. Look at even who it's coming through. Sometimes we want to operate and perform so quickly that we don't notice the small variations in the email that will quickly tip us away and let us know that, hey, this isn't coming from my supervisor or the VP or president. This is a false email, or this is some attempted attack.
Yeah.
So
I'm reminded of something I learned from, my grandmother, haste makes waste, taught me that. And you're both saying, just slow down, take a look. Who is it really from? Jonathan, go ahead.
Remove things from email. Yes. You do not need to be discussing anything of a financial basis via email.
Yeah,
exactly.
Pick up the phone and call. If you're dealing with a lot of vendors or payment systems, set up a payment system. Don't use email for this. It makes you a target. And a lot of folks think, particularly smaller business, thinking, hey, you know what? I'm not big enough. Yeah, but you do business with people who are. And even if you might not be the payload I want, you're a trusted partner for a much bigger one. So not only can I steal from you, I can trash your relationship with other businesses.
I'm listening and I'm thinking of a little HVAC contractor in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Made a target. Yes.
So email is not used for personnel decisions. It's not used for financial information. Consider any information you placed in an email. If you weren't comfortable to printing it in the LA Times and handing a copy to John, it shouldn't be in email. It's not sensitive. It's not closed.
Right.
Consider it's going to be seen. So keep your sensitive data off of a postcard form of communication.
And exactly. And that actually gets us into the next slide, because over the course of the last, 50 minutes, we've been talking of various scenarios and situations, all of which have don't do this, don't do that, be careful about this thing, watch out for that thing. All of it leads to something I think you said at the beginning of the show, Jonathan, about there are no silver bullets here. And this now becomes, if you will, okay, what's the defensive strategy? Well, SecureTheVillage has laid out the defensive strategy for you. It's a series of these 12 webinars that together constitute an information security program, starting with the very first one of these webinars back in February, where Bill Leiter and I talked about the role of leadership, because it starts there. It starts in creating that environment from the top, where we're creating a cyber adaptive culture, where people know what to do, they're sensitive to it. In what SecureTheVillage is all about turning people and organizations into cyber guardians who know what's going on, are committed to doing the right things about it. So no silver bullet. It's essentially this entire, here's the curriculum, if you will. And moving to the next slide, so much of it is based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. I think, I grew up in the even before the ISO 27001 world. I grew up back, for those old enough to remember, the Orange Book and the Red Book back in the 80s. NIST has nailed it with this way of looking at cybersecurity. And so let's spend a moment or two talking about here, where so much of what has to happen is what we talk about as resiliency. You got to be able to take a hit and keep on ticking, if you will. So let's spend a moment or two on this, because I know it plays into both of what you guys do every day, what you see every day.
Absolutely. We at Kroll use the NIST framework for all of our assessment work globally, because it does two things that are really simple but important. Number one, it gives you, this isn't a checklist. This is not a compliance formula. What this is a collection of best practices. Now, based on your business, certain things are going to be more important or less important, but all of them are going to move you to a level of having what I consider to be where you would like to be. And this is how I kind of summarize it. You want to know what data you have. You want to know where it is, who has access to it, and you want to be able to know when someone not approved or someone who is approved but accessing it in a way that doesn't match usual patterns is doing so. You want to get notified, so you want to be able to see it. Consider this as a defense in depth strategy. If you can identify your assets, you can protect them. If you can protect them, then you can put in place detection methods to see when someone's messing with them. You gain the capability to be able to respond to the problems that you detect, and that ability to respond further gives you the capability to recover, which means a small problem becomes a small problem, not something that holds the boat. And back when I was a prosecutor, and I'm sure John will agree with this, it's never the breach that kills you. It's what happens after the breach. It's how you respond, what you have in place that turns this from being a bad day to a nice long experience working with John as a victim of a crime.
And that comes into play as far as having a plan. Jonathan spoke well about it. I mean, have a plan, a procedure in place. It's not gloom and doom if you have a plan in place just in case it happens, and then continually working on that plan as time and these particular different types of threats change. You need, as the business, to be able, or a group, to be able to adapt. And it goes in hand. If when it does happen or occur, don't be afraid to come to law enforcement. We're here to help.
Yeah, very, very much so. We'll jump to that in a moment. Just part of the being prepared. Our webinar, our 10th webinar, was all about incident response and business continuity. The whole, because what was it that Dwight Eisenhower said? Going into battle, planning is essential, kind of thing. Barry Bain, I learned from back, software engineer 40 years ago. A failure to plan, of failing to plan is planning to fail that way. And the Boy Scouts, be prepared that same way. And there's 5 basic steps to this whole process: planning and preparing, detect and report, assess and decide, respond and recover, lessons learned. If you've not done that up front, know what you're doing and trained on it and tested on it, when the rubber meets the road or something's hit the fan, you're not going to be prepared. And the studies I've seen, and Jonathan, you may know even more, but the cost of recovery from an incident is significantly lower if you've done your planning work.
And what I also want to stress here is this. This isn't rocket science, and you're doing this already. You run earthquake drills, right? You've got emergency supplies set aside. You've spoken with your family about where to meet up if the freeways go down. You do this every day in your life. You go see the doctor. You get health checkups. This is not something that has to consume your life, but it does need to be a consistent part of it. We have now entered a world where we rely on data and rely on information systems for the way we do business, the way we live our lives, and the way we provide services. We need to make sure that those systems are collecting what we want and we can fix and respond to them when they have issues. This is modern life. It's not going to go away, but this doesn't have to be your life. This is something that can be done effectively and well with just a little bit of time and attention to detail. But it starts with leadership. It starts with people in positions of responsibility saying, we need to do this. And by the way, not only do we need to do this, this is part of how I'm going to rate you as my employee as to whether you're doing well and getting the bonus that year, or whether you're in the needs improvement section and getting the Saturday trainings.
That's right.
And it's not a one-time event. It's continually being vigilant, continually adapting to the changes. Don't after this webinar or one event think, okay, I've learned my lesson. We're going to have this one great day of preparedness, and then after that, nothing else is going to happen. It's something that you continually have to grow and adapt and learn with.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, you're not managing this stuff. You're at risk. Yeah, well, Jonathan, you add something.
True, and I also, and I always really like to kind of remind folks of this. This isn't just a good practice. This is something that you are legally required to do, and you can be held accountable in many ways if you don't. So this is not just good hygiene and good common sense. It also gives you the ability, when something happens, to go back to those who are holding you accountable and say, we planned, we prepared, and we had an incident. You know what? Everyone does. You just need to look at the list of the companies that are hacked. The question is, are you seen as being competent in the crisis, or are you seen as being someone who ignored, evaded, and then ultimately failed? So as a job perspective, like you were talking with that HR director, I've talked to many of them. Very few of them keep that job when they've sent out that W-2. If you are the senior executive and your company suffers a data breach, well, in many cases, if you were the one conveying that news, you're the one looking for a new job. So this is not just about protecting your company and doing the right thing. This is about ensuring your own future and ensuring that the people you rely on and the people who depend on you get to keep their futures as well.
Exactly. And John, when do you contact law enforcement? What's the, we don't want to overburden you with the trivial, but we don't want to let the bigger things go by either, because you can help us and we can help you help us. Yeah.
Exactly. And number one, don't feel as if you're being a burden. You are not. We literally have a division that's dedicated to crimes of this nature. We left a number here, is 213-257-2428. You will hear a human and they will respond. When you call, just let them know that you believe that you have been a victim of some particular form of a cyber attack, or you're the victim of a cyber crime, and they'll direct you to the proper person. As it says here, you're not an island. You have allies here in law enforcement, and it's not just any type of prosecutors. We've been specially trained, so we know, we sympathize with what you're going through. We know that time is of the essence, and we know that not only you may have lost data, it may be money, and as Jonathan was saying, it could cripple a company, and we recognize that. And so we're here to help. And so if you need some type of guidance or advice, feel free, call us, let us know.
That's one of the things I think is so valuable, so important, is the way that you've stepped up, the LA County District Attorney's Office, FBI, Secret Service, every law enforcement truly, really is looking to, if we can help you get in front of this it's a win for everybody. And just the collaboration, the cooperation is truly a win-win-win-win for the community. I want to move it on as we're at we're already past the 11 o'clock hour. So real quickly to get started, again, there's no silver bullets. You got to do this. You got to do your homework. You got to do the job that needs to be done. And if you follow the webinar series, it's creating your leadership team, reviewing your webinars, the webinars that we've done, implementing a program, developing a plan, testing the plan, running tabletop exercises. Again, watch the webinars. We tell you how to do all this stuff. We go through it. The resource kit. There's stuff online that we've put there to try to help you, the audience, get your head around this. So do take advantage of what we've done, of the wisdom and the practical advice. Combination of those two things from Jonathan and you, John, of this. So this is deep. It's serious. Companies do go out of business as a result of these kinds of things. So we cannot not take this stuff seriously. Continuing along, next month we're going to go back to an earlier webinar on securing the human, take a deeper look at it, and specifically focus on tactics that'll drive cultural adaptation. What are the basic things an organization can do to just help move that culture along, help turn their people into cyber guardians, help turn their organization into cyber guardians? My two guests, Barbara Watkins, who you saw a few months ago on bank frauds, business email compromise. She was with City National Bank at the time. She has since retired and has formed her own consulting group. And my business partner, Kimberly Pease, who handles all of Citadel's work in this space with our clients. It's just part of our ongoing monthly webinar series, the first Thursday of every month. We're here, truly our focus, turning people and organizations into cyber guardians. We want to thank you all very much for joining us today. We've got contact information on this slide. Jonathan, your information at Kroll, and John, your information at the district attorney's office as well. So in wrapping up, let me thank Jonathan and John, both of you. Any final last words?
Just thank you so much. It's a pleasure. And like I said, we're here to help. If a situation arises or you believe that you've been a victim of a cybercrime, please feel free to contact us where you can have a voice and we'll assist you with that. And thank you for attending.
I would echo that. We at Kroll are always happy to take a call. As I like to point out, we scope for free. There have been many cases where I've taken that call and sent it right over to LADA or other groups who I know can do that. But sometimes if it's out of jurisdiction, if it's something that you've got a little concern about secrecy, privacy, etc., we've been working these cases for decades, and just call us. We can tell you where you are before you have to spend a nickel. Yeah,
same thing here, whether it's SecureTheVillage, Citadel, Kroll, the DA's office. Truly, we're here to help. I mean, this is to me, this is crisis time. And our freedoms are at risk, our identities are at risk, our businesses are at risk, and we've got to work together to get our arms around this. Jonathan, John, thank you so very, very much for taking time out of your busy day to help us share the word about what this is all about and the things you can do, you out in the audience, to protect yourself, to protect your companies. Thank you all very much. I look forward to seeing you in a month. Thanks. Bye-bye. And we are adjourned. Thanks.